Good afternoon and welcome to Nana and Babu's living room for this is our first virtual Scholars Day at Ouachita. Today I will be presenting my honors thesis in fulfillment of the requirements for the Carl Goodson Honors Program. My thesis is titled Les Femmes Capables, a supplementary curriculum teaching survival English to female Senegalese ELLs. Now that's a mouthful, so I'll break it down a little bit. Les Femmes Capables is French for capable women, and I chose this title and the topic of my thesis in order to empower women and teachers of women to learn through potentially difficult circumstances. ELL is an acronym you'll see throughout the presentation, and it means English Language Learner. So where is Senegal? Senegal is on the farthest western point of Africa. It's this little orange spot surrounding the Gambia, which is the little white spot in the middle. It was first utilized as a trading point by Europeans in 1444 when the Portuguese began a trading center in Dakar. The Portuguese, Dutch, and French have all claimed Senegal. France owned Senegal for many years, from 1677 until 1960, when they finally granted the African nation its independence. Senegal's capital city and economic epicenter is Dakar, which is here. It lies on the farthest point of that peninsula. The majority of Senegalese are Muslim. There's a less than 5% of the population claim Christianity or agnosticism. The largest people group is the Wolof, who compose about 2/5 of the population. The Wolof language is used along with French as a unifier, since each tribe in Senegal has its own distinctive language. There are significant populations of Senegalese in Paris, France, in Memphis, Tennessee, and also in the Harlem neighborhood of New York City. I divided my thesis into two distinctive sections, the informational essays and curriculum topics. The 6 essays explain the purpose of my thesis and give cultural context for teachers who are my intended audience. The curriculum is separated by topic. Each topic has a list of vocabulary and a set of activities for teachers to use during their lessons. Although the vocabulary list which I offer it covers a range of topics, they are potentially too complex for beginning levels of English language learners, or ELLs. So I suggest that this curriculum is better suited to intermediate and advanced levels. The 10 curriculum topics each have a list of general vocabulary, which is separated into categories such as people you'll meet, or things and phrases to know. Following each vocabulary list is a series of potential activities pertaining to that topic. Teachers can pick apart and change these activities according to the level of their classes, and that's one of the great things I think about having these communal resources for teachers. Having myself lived for extended periods of time in a number of countries overseas, I understand firsthand the importance of learning the national language. I learned Kiswahili in Tanzania and Kenya, and I studied French in France, and all of those experiences led me to understand that there are not many curriculums which provide cultural guidelines or vocabularies which are helpful in daily life and for daily needs. Although learning a language in the ways I have and in the way many people do is certainly important and helpful, it doesn't always provide the knowledge one needs to understand common daily occurrences which are often cultural, such as how to order something in a restaurant politely, or that tax isn't included in the price on the shelf in the grocery store. This thesis provides basic cultural context, helpful teaching methods, and general information to teachers of English to immigrants in the United States. Due largely to an ever-shrinking world, having a basic understanding of English is becoming increasingly necessary. The Harvard Business Review states that English has become the global language of business, and it is the fastest spreading language in human history. At the publication of the article in 2012, 1.75 billion people around the world could speak English at a useful level. More people trying to use English, means more people trying to learn it. so there's a growing need for English teachers. Speakers of other languages choose to learn English as a foreign language, or EFL, like many students in the United States choose to learn Spanish in high school or college. They can also study English as ESL, or English as a second language, in order to live in an English-speaking country. This thesis focuses on the latter group, mainly immigrants and refugees living in the United States. It is catered specifically to women because men have a greater opportunity to use English and to learn it in daily life, since they are usually the main provider for their household, meaning that they must find a source of income, and they have a greater opportunity to be socially involved in English-speaking contexts. Muslim women, depending on the household, would be limited to a traditional context in the successful running of her home and potentially a socially acceptable business. Curriculums with an adult immigrant audience in mind should focus on specific subjects needed for work environments, such as how to read a technical manual or vocabulary for a particular vocation which can be learned at a technical school. Some immigrants may arrive in the States with extensive knowledge in a certain area, but may not have the English vocabulary necessary to practice their vocation in the States. This should be a topic used by teachers not only for the benefit of the class, but for that student so that they can use their knowledge in the U.S. Topics can be studied in groups of themes, guided by student interest and practicality rather than academic knowledge, as an understanding of that topic is both the result of the process and the process itself. This is called content-based instruction. It is defined by Diane Larson Freeman and Marty Anderson in their book Techniques and Principles in Language Teaching as a communicative approach to teaching, as language is acquired through communication, or, summed up, it is using English to learn it. English is therefore learned as a subject as well as a language. This is encouraged by activities requiring students to discuss a topic among themselves and with the teacher, taking their learning into their own hands through interaction with the content and with the teacher. Teachers need to know why each student wants to learn English, and they should discuss potential topics with them. Teachers should give students opportunities throughout the course to give input about what subjects they feel they need to learn. For example, if a student went shopping at a department store and realized they didn't understand a certain communication, maybe with the cashier or with another shopper, or if there were items that they just didn't know how to ask for, they could bring that up with the teacher, and that would become a lesson in itself for the benefit of that student and the entire class. In this way, students are given the freedom to be in charge of their learning, and they are the most involved in the progress. Studying such topics is a more efficient way to learn a language, as knowledge of such specific vocabulary is needed in daily life and is therefore used very often. Being a teacher in a diverse classroom provides many opportunities for growth, not only in knowledge but in wisdom. However, growth comes through difficult circumstances and trying times of life. So it would be a mistake to go in unprepared for tension, conflict, and cultural miscommunications. In my intercultural communications class with Dr. Ray Franklin, I read 2 books which I found pertinent not only to the subject of my thesis, but for myself as an English teacher, a potential English teacher, and for other teachers as well. These books are Leading with Cultural Intelligence by David Livermore and Foreign to Familiar by Sarah Lanier. Cultural intelligence, or CQ, according to Livermore, is the capability to function effectively across national, ethnic, and organizational cultures. He divides this kind of intelligence into 4 parts, defining the role of drive, knowledge, strategy, and action in a cross-cultural setting. Lanier's book, on the other hand, is a compilation of stories and defining cultural principles she has experienced firsthand in her international travel. One such principle is the concept of hot or cold climates. Senegal, for example, would be a hot climate, as the culture is relationship-oriented with a louder, open approach to hospitality. The United States would be a cold climate, as we tend to be task-oriented, and depending on the part of the United States you're in, we're far less likely to just drop in unannounced to a family or friend's house. Such differences in cultural approaches to everyday life are difficult for immigrants to navigate. So a teacher with a high or at least growing CQ level can work through students through conflicts which may simply come down to cultural miscommunication. In order to have an accurate picture of Senegalese culture in the classroom, it's very important to me to talk to people who have taught Senegalese students. I had the opportunity to interview two women who have both taught English in Senegal. Bailey is a university student at Ouachita who worked in an English class and taught English with the hands-on program with the IMB. And Naomi grew up in Senegal. She taught English there and she currently works with the Senegalese diaspora in France. Naomi suggested David Moranza's book, African Friends and Money Matters, for modern contexts and specific cultural topics which need to be discussed in the context of the United States, and I found that book very helpful. Bailey and Naomi helped me understand the position of women in Senegalese society. Although Senegal is a majority Muslim nation, women are approached differently than they perhaps would be in North Africa or the Middle East. Women are free to take classes if they choose to. They can shake a man's hand, and they themselves can hold positions of authority over men. However, it's important to note that authority will look different than a Western woman's authority in a Western context. Teachers should also be aware of understood behaviors such as greeting protocol. A respectful greeting in Senegal is a three-part formula. The first greeting is a statement in Arabic, which means, "I have come in peace." And the respectful response is that same statement to the greeter. The second part is a question in Wolof, translated into English as, "How are you?" And the response is, "I am fine," or "I am here." The third part is also in Wolof, and it is a question, "Do you have peace?" And the response is, "Yes, I have peace." Senegalese culture is indirect when it comes to conflict and conflict resolution. Outside of the classroom, this often comes in the form of having a third party address the situation instead of either side being directly involved. Bailey told me a story of her own experience with this in her classroom. Two female students who were best friends with each other would talk over her as she was trying to teach the lesson. Instead of bringing both students to the front or chastising them in front of their peers by pointing them out, Bailey addressed the class as a whole and asked everyone to be quiet so that everyone could learn the lesson. Calling out the two students would have brought them public shame, and it would have been difficult for them to recover from the embarrassment of that situation and to continue learning. Now that I've given glimpses of my contextual essays, we will move on to one of my curriculum topics, specifically grocery shopping. I supplemented my curriculum topics with information and activities suggested by Malinsky and Bliss in their curriculum word by word. Thank you, Mrs. Koch, for letting me use that book. It was wonderful and very helpful. I separated the vocabulary list into different sections, including types of food, which are general, like fruits and vegetables, and more specific, types of fruits and types of vegetables. I also had sections such as personal body care and baby care. One section of the list for grocery shopping is the food pyramid, and I'll just touch on this briefly for the sake of time. But having a visual like this, I borrowed this from the Harvard School of Nutrition. Bringing a visual like this to class would be very, very helpful, and having any type of physical object, such as a specific fruit, to play games with and that the students can interact with would be very helpful and is a proven more efficient way to learn. So this is one of the activities in the curriculum for this topic, and it's called What's the Idiom? The teacher would divide the class into small groups or partners, and the groups would then work to fill out the missing words of each idiom. So for this part, I need a little audience participation. I will read out the idiom, and I'll have you call out the name of whatever item fits in the blank. So the first one is, someone who always stays calm is as cool as a
cucumber.
Perfect. Someone who is lazy and sits around all day and does nothing but watch TV as a couch.
Potato.
Or me. If someone is embarrassed, that person is said to be as red as a
Beet.
Yes. Yeah, I heard a lot of things. I heard beet, I heard tomato. They all apply, right? I've also heard crab and lobster, so there are some different answers there. Thank you. This next game is called Where Do They Belong? And the teacher will divide the class into small groups again, and these groups will work to brainstorm items in these different categories. So we'll just go through this quick. Give me a section of the supermarket.
The meat section?
The meat section, that's good. Give me a type of fish or shellfish.
Crab.
Crab. Items that can be put in sandwiches.
Cheese.
Cheese, that's good. Items that you buy hot.
Cocoa.
Cocoa, yeah, hot cocoa. Hot drinks, yeah, that's good. Thank you for coming to my presentation today. For my final words, I'd like to just thank a few people. My thesis director, Dr. Hauser, who let me borrow a cardboard box full of books that were all very helpful. My readers, Dr. Johnny Wink and Mrs. Sharon Koch, and my interviewees, I couldn't have done it without them and their input. Dr. Pemberton, thank you for helping me get this idea, especially since it was due that same week. And for my friends and my family who are here, I kidnapped them to present my thesis.
Yay.
So thank you very much. So does anyone have any questions?
I was wondering if you ever do role play. If I had a colleague come in and we pretended either to meet each other on the street or maybe I'd ask for something at the pharmacy.
Yes, there are multiple activities that I've put in some different topics of the curriculum that are role play. This is a great interactive activity for students learning a language in any language, any situation. Having them practice in partners, where one is a friend who's seeing another friend for the first time in a long time, how that would look. In the pharmacy, and specifically I have a game for my topic at the doctor's office, and a doctor speaking to a patient and a patient being like, I have a stomach ache. The doctor being like, what hurts? And asking questions and finding out what the problem is. Yeah.
I have a question about time, teaching cultural ideas about time. You grew up in Africa along with us, and you know that our African friends have a more relaxed look when it comes to starting times of something or even ending times of something. You know, how do you kind of help to get them into, if they're in the West, you know, get them into a Western mindset of understanding how we view time or being on time to class or something?
Yes, that's a very important thing to have prepared and explained at the beginning of the course, at the beginning of the lessons. Yes, I talk about that in the contextual informational essays at the beginning of my thesis. Time is approached very differently in the United States. One way that you could make that, really bring that home for students, is to have a 3-strike policy. So if they're late 3 times, they have to repeat the course. Or there could be, depending on the situation, if there's a type of assessment at the end which they could pass and gain a language level, then they would repeat the course. Or you can have other types of repercussions if that is a problem.
In teaching African women, they are often very hesitant to ask questions in a classroom setting or of an authority figure. So how would you recommend a teacher deal with breaking that barrier?
That's a very good question. I think a lot can happen when students feel safe and when the environment is safe and secure. That makes all the difference in the world. If you are approachable as a teacher, if they are able to discuss things with each other and to bounce ideas off of each other, and then maybe the bravest student would come to you and ask about some different topics. As long as the environment is open enough that students feel like there are multiple ways to reach an end, then I think that these topics can be addressed, and you can help students to find a way to ask the questions that they need to. Thank you very much for coming to my presentation today. Thank you for your questions.